It's the Scaling Secrets podcast. Andrew Naegele is here from OxygenLabs.ai, and Oxygen Labs is an AI and automation agency. They specialize in automating the appointment booking and follow-up processes for businesses and agencies looking to lower their cost per acquisition. They use a combination of conversational AI calling, AI chatbots, and other automations. So if you have been hearing for these last few years the buzz of AI, but then you're having trouble navigating the various tools and knowing how to put it to use for your business to get more efficiency, to get some of those scaling secrets that we talk about, then Andrew is your guy, and we're going to be talking about Oxygen Labs and what they provide. So Andrew, glad to be speaking with you.
Absolutely, yes. And thanks for having me on, Robert. I really appreciate it. And you kind of hit it right on the head, right? That's 100% what we do. We've actually always iterating, always improving what we do, and so we've even recently hammered on and nailed down more of the sales process to not only automate the sales process, but automate the sales process in a way that still sounds human, that still interacts with the individual on a human level, and actually, can carry that conversation forward. And in many cases, even close that conversation 100% without human interaction, which is absolutely amazing.
That is the dream. You're making me think about, I think it might have even been like 5 or 10 years ago, Google did some kind of demo where they called a Chinese restaurant and they said, like, can I book a reservation for like Wednesday at 2 p.m.? And then the person was like, oh, we don't have Wednesday, but we have Thursday. And there was all this back and forth. And I remember way back then, I was really impressed, but then something came out later that it wasn't a real demo. It was just Google doing kind of like a role play kind of thing. And I thought, oh no, we're not far enough in the future yet. But then now we have, like, it seems like every day there's literally some new tool that's actually like proving what's possible now with the chat bots and the voice like kind of human sounding. It gets closer and closer. And so have we finally done it? You say we can go from start to finish to the whole sales process. Are we finally in the future?
We are in the future, and it is happening more and more every day. And so a lot of people don't really realize, right, the amount of different ways that a conversation could go. Like, you and I are here, we're having an interview on a podcast, we're talking back and forth. We think that the scope of this conversation is going to remain entirely within the bounds of business. But what happens when that conversation takes a turn into left field, right? Like, we started out with what had happened earlier with my daughter, right? Like, AI has to be able to handle that. It's not always going to go the way that you think it's going to go. And the amazing thing is AI is actually getting to a point where it's able to handle those interactions really, really well, right? So we started out with kind of like this script of, okay, I say hi, they say hi. We say, what are you doing? They say, oh, not too much, right? Like, you start with that, but what people don't realize is all of the other different ways that people could answer those questions. And AI has to be able to handle that, take it in stride, and also know like what the next thing is. And so it's actually getting really, really good at doing that in both text and speech, which speech is essentially just, text. The text is really where it happens, right? Like the AI does it on the text side and then feeds it to a voice engine that basically speaks what's in text. So it's amazing that it's actually at that capability of being able to do that. And then just what you were talking about, like, it's actually able to have not only the conversation, but then take actions based on that conversation. So it's going to lead you toward our goal, which we've given it, which is we want to book Robert on an appointment, right? And Robert can say any number of 100 different things. We hope he's going to say yes, but when he says no, the AI also has to be able to handle that objection, right? And so it does that really, really well. We're constantly iterating on it. We're constantly updating and improving the way that we prompt and the way that we have the AI handle it. But it really is doing amazing things, setting appointments, sending out text reminders, sending out anything that you want, basically. And then also being able to really like read information too, which is something that we're finding is incredibly valuable as well. So, yeah.
Yes, and there's all these uses, and I use AI every day, and you're making me realize that I take for granted more and more, and it's only like I take it for granted like 2% more every day. That number one, I can paste long chunks of information. Like I'll paste in like a podcast transcript such as this one and tell me teach me 10 things about it, or I'll paste in like a whole I'll do a select all on a web page and I'll paste it all in, even the header, the footer, the sidebar, and I just take for granted that it will magically sort that out. And even when I give, say, Chat GPT some commands, or I tell it like I want something formatted this way, I I don't know if I'm getting older, but I make more typos. And I used to go and fix the typos, but now I'm just like, let's see if it figures it out. And almost always it figures out if I phrase something wrong or misspell a word, it still understands what I'm saying. And so it seems like you're saying that there's like percentages, right? And there's like the likelihood of the conversation going completely predictably. Like you said, there's the kind of the handshake protocol. I say this, you say that. And there's for sure like a straightforward step-by-step sequence of a conversation, but then it might go more and more off the beaten path. And so you're saying that the new advantage that we have by having AI that we used to not have is this accounting for the unpredictability, the human error, the going outside of bounds, where even a few years ago you'd get some error message and you just would be completely out of luck. But now there's kind of adjusting for that. And so in this kind of situation where there's like a sales call, then you have to imagine that there's a lot of reluctance, right? With this new cutting edge technology, I'm sure there's tons of the usual objections. Someone might be saying, well, what if I set up this beautiful sequence for my sales call, but then the prospect knows that it's an AI, or they're rude, or they say some unexpected thing, and it just kind of goes completely off the rails and totally out of control. So like, having said that AI can adjust for that, like, what do you say to these kinds of objections?
Yeah. So, the amazing thing is what you alluded to there actually was the ability to think 5 steps in advance. And so that's essentially what AI does is it thinks, it's constantly thinking, actually, what are the next 5 things that could potentially, that I need to really have at my disposal to be able to handle this, right? Now, what's amazing is that it's constantly thinking on its feet and it's constantly moving toward the end result that you've given it, whatever the goal is that you've given it. Now, humans, we have emotions, we have bad days, we don't always, fear sometimes gets the best of us. And especially in sales calls where a salesperson may not know what to do if a client throws it a curveball, or what to say or how to respond, or they may have been shut down on their 10 previous sales calls and bring that with them to this sales call that they're on now. And AI doesn't ever do that. It's always working towards the goal, and doesn't matter what the other person says, they don't really let it affect them. They don't get emotional about it. And so, and the amazing thing is what we're currently working on is the ability to bring that emotional intelligence to AI as well. So there's actually a few companies out there that are currently breaking down emotion into scalable, or like into a scale essentially, where you can understand how much happiness, joy, anger, frustration, et cetera, right, is in this person's tone or is currently happening, so that the AI can then even better predict what's going to happen next, right? So we're really getting there to where it is almost scary in some instances how good it is at handling a lot of those objections and conversations. And even when somebody wants to take a far left turn or a sharp right, it can still take that in stride and usually will steer the conversation back the way that it's happening, or the way that it's supposed to be happening, right? And the amazing thing is where a human can only make X amount of dials or have X amount of conversations a day, the AI isn't limited by that in the same way. So you suddenly realize, if, for instance, I can press a button and instantly outbound dial 10,000 people, and then have 200 of those people pick up the phone, and that one individual, in this case an AI, is able to carry on 200 conversations at the same time, you're not as worried if one of them goes rogue, because it's a law of averages, it's a law of numbers, right? Like when you're able to actually outbound dial that many people, or even take that many inbound conversations at one time, even if it does go a little awry, we just try to figure out how do we make that not happen next time. So it really becomes a game of like, each time you're given a challenge, how do we overcome that challenge and make it better for the next iteration? And it's amazing its ability to learn, take that what's happening in this conversation and apply it to the next conversation. And so unlike a human, where our ability to learn is really limited by our want or need to learn, the AI is constantly learning because that's its job, right? Like it doesn't have a choice in the matter. So
And it doesn't get tired and is more predictable in the good sense of the word. And so what is is there such a thing as a typical sequence or sort of a best practice? Like with Oxygen Labs, my understanding is that there's all these kind of like outbound sales calls, right? And like voice calls and text messages. So is there either like a preferred sequence or like a demo sequence to walk us through as far as like what's possible, what could be put into use?
yeah, so we obviously do have demos like on our website that'll show you how the AI can handle different interactions with people in different various circumstances and everything. But we always take each and every client down the same sort of journey where we start to ask, like, what are you currently doing that you don't want to be doing? Right? Or what are you currently doing that we can make you more efficient at? And it's like, we don't look at this as a way to really like replace the workforce, or like completely replace a salesperson, as much as make that salesperson more efficient, right? So in the old world, that salesperson is typically outbound dialing or taking inbound calls or prospecting or whatever. They're trying to book a ton of calls on their calendar so that they can close those deals, right? Now, if you're able to eliminate that necessity and allow them to focus solely on closing deals, they're going to become much better at closing because they're going to have more opportunity to do it. They're going to be able to focus just on that. And so it's like using AI not necessarily to replace somebody as much as it is to enhance them and make them even better at their job. Get rid of the mundane tasks, get rid of the tasks that they don't need to be wasting their time on, and allow them to really get amazing at the one thing that they're trying to do, right? So
Right.
we don't really think about how much time we waste or the amount of mundane tasks that we spend our time doing, until you start to automate some of those tasks and realize the amount of like time that it frees up for you. So that's ultimately like always our goal, is to find like, what are these different places where we can make you more efficient, so that at the end of the day, every business's goal is to make more money, or most of them are anyway. And so like, what can we do to make you more efficient so you can make more money and have less overhead, right? And
Right.
that's what AI is great at doing. So that's kind of what we're always looking to demonstrate for people, if you will, is how we can do that with the different solutions that are available.
And thinking about the sales math and the AI efficiency math can sometimes be exciting, right? Like you talk about making 10,000 calls, or sometimes when some of these sales guys that really have things dialed in, the numbers are insane, right? They say, oh, well, I'll do 12 hours, 16-hour days. I'll contact 3,000 people a day just to get like 30 sales calls, just to get two people that are likely. And it's just like these crazy ratios. But you think if the AI could tee those up, or if the AI could turn 5 hours of prospecting into 10 minutes, like that's insane math squared, right? That's like even crazier with the compression that can be done. And that's what we want. We want to still get the same result or better result, but get it done with all this reduced overhead. And so has there been any sort of like surprises in these systems you set up for people? Or like, because like sometimes you think about, even like we were saying, like the crazy ratios with the selling, or like sometimes you think, well, can AI really perform this? And then like it turns out there's a way forward, or use some kind of like blend of solutions. Like, what has surprised you, or what kind of best practices that you put in place as far as just like setting these up for people?
So there's really two things that are actually incredibly important to remember with this, and that essentially really were like eye opening to me, right? Was the thought of let me automate everything, right? Like I want to automate everything. You have to almost temper that and think, I want to automate as much as possible, but there's two things. I have to be really, really good at what it is that I'm automating first, because if I automate crap, I'm going to just get more crap, right? If I want to automate something, I need to be really, really good at it to begin with. And so it's kind of like that realization for me was incredibly surprising, that like is fundamental, and as kind of silly as that sounds, that like you can't just automate everything without first making sure you have an amazing process to automate, right? And then the other side of that was also kind of digging into this thought process of how do we make things work in a robotic fashion and automated without losing that human touch, and without really like making it sound human. So you can automate all sorts of things now. You can have content spit out on your Instagram or your LinkedIn or whatever at an enormous scale. But at the end of the day, if people don't feel like there's actually an emotional connection there, if people don't feel like it's actual human, it becomes a moot point, right? So like, it's always a very fine line of realizing that we have to retain the human touch there as much as possible, and emulate the human touch as much as possible. Otherwise, you really lose your audience, you know? And that was something that I think not a lot of people realize as they're trying to automate things, and something that we really focus on trying to ensure, like, we don't hide the fact that it's AI, but we really want to try and make it as human-like as possible for people, right?
Right, you want to avoid the garbage in many different forms, and you're just giving me flashbacks to different things. Like when I first was playing around with AI, I was like, "Well, can I make it write some blog posts or some good LinkedIn posts?" And I was excited at first, but the more that it was creating, I was like, this all kind of seems the same. So I definitely get your point here of like knowing what good or great is versus mediocre or bad. Know what the score is, know what you're looking at, or like what your kind of step-by-step process is. And then when I looked into some of these things, it's like how to write a good blog post, they're like, well, ask ChatGPT for like different hooks and kind of develop the paragraph and like go back and forth. It's like, okay, that makes a lot more sense to kind of replicate your existing process that might be stuck in your head, might be intuitive, but do it on a kind of faster decision making sort of basis. And then like I had a client once that said he wanted me to use AI to make a bunch of social, like motivational, like TikTok scripts. And it was fun at first, but then same thing. After about 100 of those, I'm like, this is all saying the same thing 100 different times. So there's definitely the garbage factor to avoid in AI. And so what is the answer there? Is it just a matter of like going back and forth, or like improving your process? Like how do we get maybe not 100% human, but this kind of AI human blend? How do we get the good quality?
It's, for me, and for like the way that we look at this, it's really about never settling for the way things are. And so what that means is we use these tools, as I said, not to replace humans, but to enhance them. And so when you look at this as like, how can I improve my content and make posting content take less time and produce a higher quality output? Not how can I completely like get rid of the task, but how can I actually like improve the quality overall? And that's what it is for us. Like I said, it's all about making you as more efficient as possible, making sure that like you're able to complete your job to the best of your ability, and then put that on steroids, right? So like it's when you take these GPTs, these chats, the different AI agents, and you give them a very specific task for you, you can start to stack these things up. So it's like one of the things that we've helped one of our partners actually works on is he's creating stuff around crypto, for instance. So an agent that will look up all the charts and what's happening there, and then another agent that scrapes all of what everybody's talking about currently with YouTube and stuff like that, and having like these really defined roles for each individual agent, and then kind of like a master agent, if you will, that takes all of that data and then compiles it and then makes it easily digestible for you so that you can ultimately make the best decision with that data. So what used to take you hours and hours and hours to do, now you're able to do in fractions of a minute to make better decisions, to improve your processes and become even better at what you do, right? So it's like if it used to take you 3 hours to look at all the charts in the morning, and now you're able to have an agent that sums all of that up for you in minutes, like imagine how much more powerful that is, right? But it's
Right.
and it's like apply that now to every business, right? So like something as simple for me, I went into McDonald's the other day, and this isn't necessarily AI as much as it is automation, but I went into McDonald's the other day and I noticed they now have an automated machine that fills drinks for you. On a simple level, like you think, oh, big deal, like it's filling a soda up for you, right? But think about before that process was automated. That fountain drink, you would have a human that would fill it up with too much ice and then dump half of it out. And then they'd fill it up with soda and it would always spill over the edge. And then you'd have all of that waste there, right? And like, or they would fill it up and it'd be too foamy, so they dump the whole thing down the drain, right? So, and it's like there's all of this stuff that like we just don't realize how much we waste or how inefficient we are until you look at now that machine drops 35 ice cubes every time. Not 34, not 37, 35. And then it fills it up with exactly 30 ounces because it's a 32-ounce cup. And it's like, you know, you take that and now you transition that to your own business in whatever it is, whether it's leads, whether it's follow-up, whatever it is. Like, there's no longer, well, I don't know, I'm going to try to send 100 messages today. It becomes, I'm going to send 100 messages. And it comes back to numbers for pretty much every business, right? Like, no matter what business you're in, you're always trying to focus on numbers. And so it becomes a numbers game of, for instance, you know, automating cold email, for instance, right? If I can send out 1 million emails a month and only 1% of those actually get opened, well, that's 1% of 1 million is what, like a 1,000 or 10,000 or something
10,000,
like that?
yeah.
10,000, right? So thanks for helping me with the math. So, you know,
Sure.
1% is 10,000. So now if only 1% of those actually lead to an appointment, you know, now I've got what, 100, 1,000 appointments, 100 appointments, right?
100.
Like, you know, so now I've got 100 appointments. If I only close 1% of those, that math I can do, that's one close, right? So now I know for every 1 million emails I send, I can get 1 sale. I've automated that. That's good. Now I got to improve it. So now I improve my open rate. And if I get my open rate to 2%, everything below it also multiplies times 2, right? And then so that's like the overarching goal here is with everything to simplify and automate what you can, but constantly be improving it so that all of those numbers ultimately can scale up and make you 3 times more efficient at half the cost or less. And like that's the goal, right?
Yeah. And I love your mindset here, your curiosity and your sort of incremental progress, and especially of the waste or the emotion driven actions that we're not even aware of, right? Like you said, well, I need to send 100 cold emails, and maybe my brain plays tricks on me, and I think I've sent 99, but I've only sent 34. And by using these smarter tools, then we get some of the certainty and the predictability. And then what that gives us is the ability to improve the system, right? And a lot of people throw out this term automation, but it's a loaded term, right? Because there can be these degrees of automation. And then when you hear about the guys like you that really have the automation dialed in, you hear things like, well, automation doesn't mean completely hands off. It means that you're always iterating and looking at ways to improve the system and seeing where it can maybe go wrong or be better. And you don't have that when you're stuck within the system doing all of that. And so you can kind of be at more of like a elevated managerial level and improve things that you otherwise wouldn't have thought to improve or would not have had time to improve. And so you're kind of stealthily dissolving some objections here, right? Some people saying, oh, well, the cold calling hasn't that worked for 200 years and the emailing hasn't that worked for 30 years. And so you would say, well, it has worked sort of, but it's always been inefficient, and there might even be somewhat of an arms race. There might people who are using these technologies, and they might leave us in the dust. If they can do 10,000 outbound calls, and in that span of time we can only make 20, then we really need to get on the AI train. And so what's possible here? Like we mentioned some little tidbits about Oxygen Labs and how there is like the human voice and the calling and the SMS, but what is the system? What is the package? If someone says, okay, I need Oxygen Labs to get my sales process better with AI, like what are the solutions? What's possible?
So it's a little bit different for everybody, right? And we kind of take a custom approach to everybody. We have set systems where, if you just want to come in and buy, 2 agents, for instance, and have one do, you want to have one do your awareness campaigns and another one do follow up or whatever, then we can implement that for you. And that typically gives people kind of a little bit of a taste to where they're like, okay, now what else can we do? And the same with like a chatbot where we can come in and do a reactivation campaign, and suddenly you realize I have thousands of customers in a database that nobody's ever followed up with, and then we come in and we automate that process and get you 30 more sales that you had no idea were sitting in your computer being neglected, right? And so those are the little things that we look for with each individual client, and then ultimately try to improve upon, because for every process, it's everything is always a process. So we always start with one particular goal in mind, but again, it comes back to that constantly iterating, constantly getting better at everything. So we'll come in and we'll look at like your follow-up process. We'll try to automate that follow-up process for you, and then once we have that running fairly well, then we'll look at, okay, now can we optimize your lead generation? And, then you have all of these different, kind of pieces of your lead generation, right? You might have your outbound dialing, you might have ad generation, or you might be sending cold email or whatever it is. We go in, we try to automate that one piece, iterate on it, make it better. And then now you have 2 things that are automating and making your business more efficient. And you move on to the next thing and the next thing until, you're at a point where, what used to take a team of 12 employees and highly inefficient with a lot of stuff falling through the cracks here and there, you can now do with either less employees and produce more outcome, or you can produce drastically more outcome with the same number of employees. So it's almost scaling in a box, if you will. It becomes a scientific approach to, we know if we put this in, we're going to get X out. There is no question. We know if we put all of these ingredients into a bowl and mix them up, we're going to come out with chocolate chip cookies. There's not a question in our mind, because we know that if we put those ingredients in, that's what's going to come out. It's just a matter of getting people aboard that same philosophy, and it works.
And I love your timeline here. I love how it's not just like throw out everything that you have and replace it with this. You're saying like, hey, try this little piece and you'll be amazed and excited at how just this just happens on its own now. And then this part, you follow up with the customers, and now this part pays for itself, and it like you can slowly ease in on board of the AI train and just kind of get it, as we were saying, like incrementally better, so that way it just becomes more systematized, more automatic. AI does more, and it in fact becomes better and more consistent and more predictable than a human that gets tired, forgets, juggles other tasks, is inconsistent. Now the AI makes this all sort of happen. And so what is the kind of, is there like is it a fair question to ask like about like an expected timeline and a price range for this sort of thing?
Yeah, so it does vary, kind of depending on the customer, right? And what it is that they're doing. And so we typically will hop on some sort of a discovery call to find out where you're at and where you're looking to get to. But for the most part, we have packages that start as low as $9.97, to really just kind of get you up and running if you want to kind of man the ship on your own. And it goes all the way up into, six figures and above, depending on what it is that exactly you want to automate. So to give you an example of that, one of our enterprise level clients that we look at, they have over 200 locations around the US. They have a largely human sales force that for years has done things the exact same way. They've gone out and they've prospected in person and met people and talked to them about advertising, and then ultimately they sell them on advertising, and they retain them, and then they continue to advertise with them for a long time. Now we've implemented, we're starting to implement AI for them, so that again we can make those employees that much better by automating the entire lead nurturing and finding and prospecting process, so that now everybody that goes out and sells can get better at doing just selling, because that's what they're there for. Like they're obviously really good at selling people, making relationships. It's not about like eliminating their ability to create relationships with people or not be human. It's about giving them more opportunity to create relationships with people that are ready and willing to do that, like finding more ready, willing, and able people that want to create that relationship so that you can nurture it, instead of wasting your time on people that are never going to be interested in what it is that you're offering, right? And so like for those clients, something like that we roll out in stages, and we typically operate on some sort of a performance model, where it's always a negotiation, but it depends. Like, do we want to do a percentage of sales? Do we want to do a percentage of leads? What does that look like for each individual business? And we ultimately just look at it like, if there's an opportunity there for us to help you grow and scale and expand, then we're willing to kind of take that risk, as long as we see an opportunity there for us as well. And so we believe in relationships, essentially, is what it comes down to. If you're willing to give us a shot, we're willing to give you a shot, a lot of instances too.
Wonderful. And well, you were at the right location to be talking about this sort of thing, right? The Scaling Secrets podcast, talking about AI and building this kind of monster machine that does all the lead nurturing and follow up and et cetera. And so if someone is going to oxygenlabs.ai, are there any sort of prerequisites? Like, do you only work for or like certain kind of companies, certain size, certain level of sophistication? Like, what should someone already have in place in order to work with you?
We typically like to see a client who already has a a process of bringing in leads that we can then refine and improve and so on and so forth. Ultimately, we can help businesses of all sizes and shapes, but you typically have to be doing at least 10, 20K a month in revenue and above to really have the best opportunity for us to be able to automate and have it make sense for you, right? We also do a lot of free stuff where we will help others to kind of learn this stuff through YouTube and communities and stuff like that. For anybody that's not quite there yet. But typically, our ideal client is in that 50 to 100K a month plus, and they have a semi-large team of double digits or more, and really are looking to try and improve the overall efficiency of their team.
Wonderful. So ideal client, 50 to 100K a month, double-digit sales team. So that way we can get something to work with and adjust the size and scope, as you were saying, right? Either same result, less employees, or same employees, greater result. And is OxygenLabs.ai the next step, logical place to go?
Yeah, typically, I mean, if you go to oxygenlabs.ai, you can find a calendar link there to be able to book a link with me, or to be able to book a call with me. I still take those calls personally. And quite honestly, no matter how big we get, I will probably always try to be the main point of touch for most people, just because I enjoy that. That's ultimately why I do this, is because I love working with people and seeing where they're at and then where we can take them to. So, that's what I find the most joy in. So I'll always probably be the person that's right there for them. That's typically the fastest and easiest way. We do have a school community that's the largest AI community on school currently, AI Riches, where we kind of help starting agency owners who are kind of looking to get into the AI and automation space. And we have a number of members that are actually coming from a mastermind that we lead, where we're all kind of coming together to really help the masses, essentially. So we'll hopefully have some exciting news with that too in the future. So.
Very nice. So you mentioned the AI Riches community on School and OxygenLabs.ai in order to book that call, to chat with Andrew, to see what's possible, to share your problems with him, because Andrew's an entrepreneur and he loves solving problems, because solving problems leads to solutions and bigger problems and all those. But luckily, we're living in this age where AI can help us out. So Andrew, near the end of a podcast, I like to sort of stump my guest a slight bit and ask for a fun quote or lesson. So as people are going to OxygenLabs.ai, do you have any final parting words of advice, any fun quote or lesson to really get us excited and inspired?
My favorite lesson actually comes from my 11-year-old daughter. When we were out riding jet skis in the Florida coast, and we were spinning around with a bunch of dolphins and stuff, and she got nervous and scared that she was going to kind of fall off, and she did end up falling off, and she went into the water. And of course, she came out and she was kind of crying and upset and everything. And we kind of had a moment there where I was like, listen, there's two ways that you can look at this. You can say, I fell off of the jet ski and I had the most horrendous experience. Or you can say, I freaking swam with the dolphins. Right? And it's like, so I have her on video actually saying I swam with the dolphins, and with some colorful stuff in between there as well that makes it even more enjoyable at her age. But that's one of the things that ultimately for me is like the biggest mindset shift, is understanding that like there's two ways to look at everything. You can look at it through a negative lens and you can say this happened to me, or you can say this happened for me, and what can I really take from this to like know that this was the most positive and encouraging experience ever, right? So we're not always going to succeed in everything that we do, but always look for what's the positive out of that, and how can I reframe that particular experience to be a positive experience for me and for my business, and how can I use that to move forward and make better decisions, for the next day. So
I love that. The positive reframe to get the better perspective instead of this happened to me, this happened for me. It's like when you think about a near miss or a near hit or a near death experience, it's what you make of it. So very amazing and inspiring. And it is time now to go to oxygenlabs.ai. Andrew Naegele, wonderful speaking with you.
wonderful speaking with you too, Robert. Thank you so much for having me on. And thank you to the Scaling Secrets community. I hope you found something and took away some sort of value out of this. And I certainly hope that you start to implement AI in your life in some way or another to truly help you and your business just get to the next level. So